Listeners, you're still watching News of Extra, reaching you live from our studios in Abuja, the nation's capital. 2023 is by the corner. I think we have barely just 2 months to go, and we'll be looking at the way forward, possible challenges and solutions ahead of the general elections. To do justice to this topic, we have our guests in the studio, Jude Ohanele, the Program Director, Development Dynamics. Thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank you very much.
2023 general election is here.
Yeah.
Are there fears?
Sure, there are challenges, and we've had elections in the past, especially when we started electoral reform right from 2011, 2015, 2019. So there are perennial challenges we've had in our elections, and there are fears that they will also rear their heads. Again, the whole issue of the huge logistics that INEC run on election day, and the challenges of election materials not getting to the polling units on time, the challenges of even INEC postponing the election if they think they are not very ready. But in recent times, they've been telling us they are ready, that they are moving, and their timelines are realized. So we hope that this time around there won't be any postponement, and that INEC will be able to deploy effectively across all the polling units in the country, in collaboration with all the security agencies who also have a role to play. The security challenges also we are dealing with, and the whole issue of the citizens also coming out to cast their vote and doing that very peacefully. So we hope that there won't be the challenges of insecurity on election day, And then, of course, we also believe that the people INEC will put in the field will be properly trained to be able to do the job effectively. Because with the new technology that is coming on board on a nationwide basis, the BIVAS, there is also need for proper training of all those who will use it. And now that technology is backed by law. So what it does mean is, in the absence of that technology, you cannot conduct a valid election. For those who are even prevaricating, it's now an issue of law. So for it to be effectively executed, there's need for effective training of those who will use it in the field on that day. So these are some of the challenges that we have coming ahead, and then we hope that all the various stakeholders, especially INEC, will do their best to make sure that we surmount all of this and deliver for this country a reasonable election that will be accepted by both those who will win and those who will lose.
Quite interesting.
I like that.
The past few weeks, the past few months, have witnessed INEC offices burnt down, materials razed down. This calls for a serious, source for worry. Do you think INEC will meet up? Do you think INEC, even though the INEC boss has come up to say that whether they are burnt down or not, the elections will still go on as usual, don't you think it's also a cause for source of worry and for stakeholders to come together to put all hands on deck to see that the election is credible, free and fair?
Yeah, sure. The attack on INEC offices are seriously misplaced. I know a lot of Nigerians are very angry, really. The country hasn't been really governed. So many people are very, very angry. But the truth is that we're not going to solve this problem with violence. And attacking INEC is the worst of it all, because you can't even fix the problem without electing good leadership. And there is no other way to get good leadership except via election. The next alternative is by appointment. So who is going to appoint? And there is no provision for that in our law. It has to be by election. So it is important for all aggrieved parties to understand that destroying INEC facilities and attacking INEC is a very wasteful effort that will not solve the problem for anybody. So it's important for us to know that. And like you noted, it's going to be a challenge for INEC. I know they have some level of redundancy in their preparation, but at a certain level of vandalization, it will affect their capacity to deliver. And that's why it's important that the security agencies and those at the various levels of government do come in. This country has been a victim of poor governance. Part of this whole challenge is the near total lack of governance at the local government level. The state government just seized up all the resources. In most of the states in Nigeria as we speak, they don't conduct local government elections. The governors just appoint their stooges to sit in there as a sole administrator or transition, whatever they call it. And those guys are not delivering anything on the ground. So there is continuous impoverishment of people at the community level. And this has made it easy for the agents of violence to easily recruit. So we're dealing with a developmental decay here, much more than a criminal justice issue. So that is why it's important that all stakeholders, the governors, should begin to make those democratic moves that will get this tension down. There hasn't been any serious commitment actually at the level of government to get this tension down, and they need to do it so that this violence can come down. We can go into this election with INEC materials intact so that citizens can make their choice. Because it's only the people of Nigeria that will decide who will govern them. And except we do all we can to achieve that, we will remain a collective failure. So that's why it's important that all stakeholders, and you know this is actually beyond INEC, the whole issue of vandalizing and burning down their offices. This is a security sector issue that the governors and the security agencies will need to deal with. And we hope they will deal with this very effectively so that this does not become a stumbling block for this election.
I'm glad you mentioned governors here. You know that INEC has done so much to ensure that this election is credible. And in fact, myself and Grace spoke extensively about the CBN policy, which I think to a large extent will check the issue of vote buying. But then, if you look at the states and how they work, you have a situation where agencies like yours and other monitoring agencies who come in to monitor elections are confined to the city centers. And then a whole lot happens in the rural areas where perhaps most of you cannot reach. So how are you looking at checking this sort of arrangement such that we can curb the issue of not necessarily rigging right now, but manipulation, manipulating people to vote in a certain direction? Because we know that when it comes to rigging is almost going to be impossible this time around. What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, actually, we monitor across the country, really. In our Nigerian Civil Society Situation Room, Development Dynamics is a member of the Nigerian Civil Society Situation Room. And under our Nigerian Civil Society Situation Room, we deploy nationwide. And we monitor, in the rural areas. I remember the election in Anambra, I personally went to one of the remotest part of Anambra, which is called Anambra West, where you have the Igala-speaking part of Anambra. For those who don't even know that I have Igala-speaking people in Anambra.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the terrain, even the road to the place is something you need to have a full story for. We get to those places to also see what happens. But like you noted, the more we deploy to those areas, the better. But then the challenge of insecurity as well is something that has escalated in recent time, which is going to affect even some of those levels of deployment. But the idea is that with cooperation of the security agencies, we're able to deploy. But having said that, it is not actually the job of the work of the observers could have some impact on elections being properly conducted. But the core duty of election being properly conducted at the polling unit lies with the communities. Yeah, it is important for people to realize this. The job of INEC on election day is defined to make sure that those electoral materials get to the polling units on time for people to vote. But when those young men and women who work for INEC on an ad hoc basis arrive at that polling unit, what happens there is totally off the hands of INEC in most cases. It is in the hands of the community. And that's why I tell people, election manipulation is a community issue.
Okay.
Yeah, and it is important for community leaders to understand this. Because when you rig election, you manipulate the electoral process, in the presence of your young people who are highly impressionable, you are destroying your community. Because you are actually using the electoral process, which is a very sacred process. Beyond the holy books, there is no other paper you ever touch better than the ballot paper. Because that's what you use to recruit at the highest level of decision making. Now, when a community allows itself, either because they've been given money or one inducement or the other, to mess up that process in their polling unit, beyond the process they have messed up, which will have an impact on them for 4 years, they are destroying the future of their community because they are clearly, with impunity, telling their children that fraudulent activities are the ways to proceed. So that's why it's important that people realize that they need to guard those polling units, they need to maintain peace, they need to follow the rules as outlined by INEC, they need to cooperate with those young men and women who are the election officials to make sure that accreditation is done properly, people vote peacefully, everybody stays there quietly, join in counting the votes, declare the results, support the presiding officer to complete the result sheets, and then take the pictures and upload. All of this lies with the community.
Okay, but quickly now, another concern for me has to do with the issue of security. Now, I know it has been a general problem over the years, but these issues were or have been to a large extent handled in the northeastern part of the country, such that elections can effectively go on there. But we have a new problem right now that has to do with the ESN, IPOB, the sit-at-home order in the southeastern part of the country. For me, when I look at this, I fear a lot that elections might not happen there. And even if it happens, there might be issues that probably will be out of the control of security agents and all of that. How do you think this issue will be resolved before the elections?
Yeah, that is the duty of those in governance. Like I always say, there's this joke they make that one of the past Nigerian leaders say, if a set of organized violence lasts for more than 24 hours, you should be able to look at it and accuse the government. I mean, it's the duty of those in authority to make sure that these things are handled. And you use both essentially non-kinetic measures and then kinetic when it is necessary to make sure that everybody falls within the rule of law. So what I expect is that the governors at these various states should be able to deploy their governance capacity and even escalate on it to engage this process and maintain peace in those communities so that elections can hold. There's no other option. And if those in power think they can't do this, they should just quietly resign. The problem we have here is that you have people sitting in offices, things are breaking down, and nobody is calling for their resignation. So I think we've gotten to a level where if you think as a governor you are not able to manage all of the issues within your state and maintain a certain level of stability for citizens to live a normal life, you can as well resign. I mean, this is not a death sentence. You are not put in there, just for being there. So, I mean, if you have tried all you can and you don't get things sorted out, you resign. But if you think you don't want to resign, please let them do their best. These are done by human beings. There is no spirit doing this violence, and there is no spirit, doing all of this. So these are things that are fully within the purview of those who have the resources of the people, who have the mandate of the people to work out the solution. And I believe that the solution is very possible. It's just for those in authority to make sure they do their job.
So far, do you think INEC has done enough regarding sensitization, education, enlightenment, creating more awareness on the dangers, solutions ahead of the 2023 elections, finally?
Yeah, well, INEC has got to do its job about the election, really. I mean, the danger and all of this is not their purview. They've done awareness in terms of even their processes and all that. They've done a bit, really, but they need to do more. Okay. But most importantly is the political parties. All over the world, the major instrument of political participation and mobilization are the political parties. They are the ones that are everywhere to teach their members, get the regulations and the rules from INEC, pass it on to their members, and effectively mobilize the people. Unfortunately, our political parties in this country haven't been doing that. We have political parties that to me seem more like some loose patronage networks that gather every 4 years to share money and capture power. The real issue of civic education, citizens mobilization and all that towards credible election, they haven't done much of that. And it is their duty, and that's why we need to call them out, to be able to use their resources to mobilize, educate the citizens on the new technologies, rather than kicking against a technology that has been couched by law. There's nothing INEC can do about this anymore, and INEC didn't make the law. The law was made by the National Assembly, which is a representation of the political parties. So they should focus on going to educate the citizens, their members, and other voters on how these new technologies will work, as has been prescribed by INEC, so that a lot more people will be aware. Of course, the National Orientation Agency also has some duty to do here. And then civil society and those of you in the media as well. You've done relatively well, but we all need to up our game to make sure that as many Nigerians as possible do understand these processes, so that on that day, we'll all cooperate to give ourselves a credible election that we'll all be proud of.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jude. Well, that's how much we can take on
wish you
today's
could. I wish the
edition.
conversation could go on,
No, we
you
can
know.
have him. We can have him.
Anele's talking as if he's
We'll
the
definitely
lecturer.
invite him. We'll definitely invite him again. You know, talking from experience, situation room.
Yeah.
You know everybody there. You fear them all. Situation room. You're on your own. Thank you very much once again. Well, we've been talking about the way forward, possible solutions ahead of the 2023 election. And our guest has been Jude Ohanele, the Program Director, Development Dynamics. Like I earlier said, that's how much we can take on today's episode of the program, News Up Extra. Until we come your way, same time, same station, 8. Merry Christmas in advance, even though we have 2 weeks ahead. And from Aunduna,
It's bye-bye for now. Merry Christmas in advance as well.
bye.
Have a nice day.
Yeah.